Hi everyone. In this video, we are going to talk about the Chapter 3 engagement planning activities that take place. And I'm going to have a few videos for us that we're going to go over in this section. So first, we're going to start, this video is going to be those pre-engagement activities. And then I will have 3 other videos for you to watch. The first one, or the next one, will be the audit procedures, which we'll talk about those tools that we have in our auditing toolbox. So when we are trying to gather audit evidence, what tools or what procedures can we do to gather that evidence? Then we'll talk about audit documentation. So after you have completed your work, how do you document that so someone coming along can know exactly what it is you have done? And then finally, we'll wrap up this series of videos with a video on materiality. So let's jump into our pre-engagement activities. So there's 3 things to talk about. So the first are the client acceptance activities. So before we decide to take on a client, or if we're going to be continuing with a new client, before the engagement begins, we are required by standards to do 4 specific things. So the first thing is we need to evaluate the integrity of the client management. So I like to think about this like dating. So when you're going on a date with someone for the first time, you want to make sure that it's a good guy or a good gal that you're going out with, and that there's someone you want to spend your time with. Same thing when we're going and taking on a new client. We want to know if the client that we're taking on is a good person, if they're trustworthy, if they're reputable, or if they're a slug or a slime ball and we don't want to be associated with them. We want to know that information. Then in chapter 2, we talked about independence. A key component of the client acceptance activities is that we need to make sure that we are in compliance with our independent and ethical requirements. So we talked about independence in fact, we talked about independence in appearance. We know that we need to be independent of our clients, and we need to make that determination before we take on that client. So we have to make sure we're in compliance before we even step foot into their office or accept them as a client. Then we have to communicate, or the key is to attempt to communicate with the predecessor auditor. I'll talk about that one more in a little bit. And then finally, we have to take steps to understand the client and their environment. So we can't audit what we don't understand. So we need to make sure we understand our clients so that we can come in and audit them. So what does that mean? Well, we want to know their organizational structure, their policies and procedures. What controls do they have in place? What documentation of transactions do they have? All those sorts of things are things that we'll want to gain an understanding of. After we have done these 4 things, there may be other tasks that we may want to do. So we may want to run background checks as part of evaluating the client integrity. We may want to look at their financial statements, look at their prospective financial statements, do some analysis on that. Those aren't required procedures, but there are other things that we may want to do. After we've decided that we're going to take on that client, then we are going to prepare the engagement letter. So the engagement letter acts as a contract between the auditor and the client. And so this is written by the auditor, the client will sign it, and then it will go into our work papers. And the purpose of this letter is to reduce the misunderstanding. So it really serves for both the client and the auditor to understand the expectations. So what should this letter include? The first thing is the objective of the engagement. So are we doing an audit of their financial statements? Are we helping management do a particular piece? So recently I helped a client review their expenditures for a particular client to make sure that their billings were up to date. So obviously that had a very narrow scope. So that would be the objective of that engagement. It helps to define the responsibilities of management, what management is going to be responsible for, and the responsibilities of the auditor. And then finally, any limitations on that engagement. So if we're not doing a full-blown audit and we're only narrowing that focus, that will be spelled out in that engagement letter. Finally, we have the communication with the predecessor auditors. So the successor auditor is the new auditor. The predecessor auditor is the old auditor. We are required to attempt to communicate. We want to get information from that predecessor auditor about why they aren't working with them anymore, any information that they might have or want to share. We may ask if we can look at their work papers so that we can get a feel for what they're doing. So that is the last piece of these pre-engagement activities, is that we have to attempt to communicate with those predecessor auditors. That wraps up all I wanted to cover in this video. Tune in for my next one on audit procedures. Have a great afternoon.